3.
Good evening and welcome again to Adelante Tucson, Tucson's new platform for unapologetic political analysis. I am your host, Zaida Olivier.
And I'm your co-host, Stephanie Koch.
I would like to begin today by commemorating the memory of Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin would have been 22 years old this past Sunday. Trayvon was shot and killed by George Zimmerman on the 26th of February in 2012, just a few weeks after turning 17 while he was walking home from the convenience store. After spotting Trayvon walking just while being black, Zimmerman followed him, harassed him, and eventually shot and killed him. Trayvon was found to be carrying a bag of Skittles and an Arizona iced tea. No charges were immediately filed. After months of petitions and internal investigations, including a special investigation by the FBI, charges were finally brought against Zimmerman on April 11th, 2012. On July 13th, 2013, Zimmerman was found not guilty. Massive protests and countless movements followed the shooting. Notably, Zimmerman's acquittal inspired a Facebook post that included the phrase Black Lives Matter, which later became the name for the Black Lives Matter movement. Trayvon's parents have released a book titled Rest in Power, The Enduring Life of Trayvon Martin. We would like to thank them for their activism and for their perseverance under such tragic and unjust circumstances. Thank you.
Betsy DeVos has been confirmed as Secretary of Education in an unprecedented Senate vote where Vice President Pence delivered the tie-breaking vote. DeVos has absolutely zero experience in the education system, but that comes only as an afterthought to Republican lawmakers since she has donated over $200 million to the GOP, who have now put her in charge of America's last remaining jewels, our public education system. DeVos is a billionaire and has been a staunch advocate for school choice and for voucher programs with deep ties to the Reformed Christian community. This is to say, DeVos believes the U.S. education system should be opened up to for-profit charter schools and has also worked to strip teacher unions of their influence. Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, called DeVos the most ideological anti-public education nominee. The founding of the cabinet-level position over 4 decades ago. DeVos has stated that education is a closed system, a closed industry, a closed market. It's a monopoly, a dead end. Yes, according to this billionaire, our education system should be a market to be exploited. This logic proposes that using public funding to open up our public education system to capitalists will offer parents increased choices, yet it doesn't take a genius to understand that this is just another guise to drive for the defunding of our public schools and push for the privatization of our education system. Now, to determine the immediate effects of privatization, we need only take a look at DeVos's home state of Michigan, where the DeVos family has been the leading financial and political backers of the school choice effort. Michigan is one of the nation's biggest school choice laboratories, as the state sent $1 billion in education funding to charters annually, 80% of which are privately owned. As charters expanded, the state's rank has fallen on national reading and math tests. A federal review in 2015 found that an unreasonably high percentage of charter schools are also on the list of Michigan's lowest performing schools.
Prior to today's vote, we saw a massive nationwide effort to persuade Republican senators to block DeVos's nomination after it was announced that Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine would break with their party and vote against her confirmation. Here in Arizona, Senator Jeff Flake and Senator John McCain were rumored to have been open to public opinion, which led to a flooding of calls and emails by constituents, the large majority of whom opposed DeVos's confirmation. To the disappointment of many, but to no one's surprise, the two Republican autocrats decided that the future of our education system should be led by a billionaire who seeks to destroy it by opening it up as a for-profit market. Clearly, their only priority is to defend the interests of their biggest funders. The people's interest is not of much importance to them. Constituents are only valuable when it's time to exploit their votes. Party politics is all these politicians understand, but to be fair, this isn't a trait only found on the Republican side of the aisle. Again, this should come to no one's surprise. Both Flake and McCain endorsed Donald Trump through the bigotry, through the hate, through the misogyny, and through the never-ending ignorance of his campaign. Jeff Flake reminds me of a saying, how does it go? Oh yeah, once a tool, always a tool. And McCain, oh John McCain, since your loss of in 2008, the only thing you have been good for is obstruction. So please, save us all a headache and just resign.
In unsurprising news, Trump's appointee Ajit Pai, chair of the Federal Communications Commissions, has already begun attacking net neutrality rules and protections for consumers. Pai, a former Washington lawyer who's worked for the Senate, the Justice Department, the FCC, and Verizon, has been in staunch opposition to net neutrality and industry regulations. As an FCC regulator, he consistently voted against policies and regulations that would ensure net neutrality. In December of 2016, while attending a gala, Pai said, "In the months to come, we also need to remove outdated and unnecessary regulations." And boy, did he not hesitate.
As early as last week, Pai and his Republican-controlled committee has blocked 9 companies from providing affordable high-speed internet to low-income families, withdrew the FCC support from an effort to curb the exorbitant cost of phone calls from prisons, where rates can be as high as $17 for a 15-minute call, and said he disagrees with the 2015 decision to regulate the internet like a public utility. So we can see how every person appointed by this administration is a lobbyist for their prior bosses and the interests of stockholders and profits. Pai is an industry puppy who wags his tail at every whistle of his corporate overlords, even being praised by industry groups for his leadership and forward thinking. I guess privatizing and deregulating every public institution is the way to lead into certain failures.
And finally, in international news, let us briefly remember the heroic Hugo Chavez, former president of Venezuela and one of Latin America's most influential leaders of the 21st century. This past February 4th marked the 15th anniversary of the military and civic uprising that took place in Venezuela on February 4th, 1992. This military uprising was organized and led by a group of patriotic soldiers within the Venezuelan armed forces, named the Bolivarian Revolutionary Movement, and its objective was to oust the corrupt government which had historically governed in favor of the rich oligarchy and imperialist foreign interests. In order to comprehend the national importance of this state for the Venezuelan people, we must review the social and the political conditions that gave rise to the Bolivarian Revolution, which came to power in 1999 with the election of Hugo Chavez as president. By 1989, the Venezuelan government had implemented harsh and devastating neoliberal economic reforms of austerity measures, privatization of state companies and public services, the elimination of social subsidies, increased state debt, and tax cuts for the elite and rich sectors. These economic policies were recommended and imposed by US-dominated international financial institutions like the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. The catastrophic result of these economic policies had on the population that already suffered from 50% poverty and over 20% of extreme poverty rates was disastrous and inevitably led to a social uprising, mainly in the capital of Caracas, which became known as the Caracazo. During the Caracazo uprising, the corrupt, unpatriotic, and oligarchical government ordered the nation's army to shoot and massacre the Venezuelan masses who were righteously rebelling against the inhumane social and economic situation of the country. Nevertheless, among the army, there already existed a faction of patriotic soldiers led by Hugo Chavez who had been organizing for the past decade and who refused to raise their arms against the people. In 1992, it was this same organization of patriotic soldiers under the name of the Bolivarian Revolutionary Movement that led a military coup which sought to oust the criminal and corrupt government of the elites and place the social interest of the majority of the poor and working people of the country as the primary emphasis of the state. Although the coup attempt ultimately failed and the majority of the soldiers were imprisoned, by 1997, Hugo Chavez had been freed and was leading a new political party called the Fifth Republic Movement, winning thereafter the presidential elections of 1998.
Now, by 1999, the people of Venezuela had democratically approved the most progressive and socially advanced constitution of Venezuelan history. And this, in turn, has allowed the Bolivarian Revolution to radically transform and improve Venezuelan society as a long-time oil exporting economy. One of the first economic measures taken by the Bolivarian government was the nationalization of the oil industry, which has been historically controlled by multinational corporations and their political lackeys within the Venezuelan government. By using the oil revenues, the Bolivarian government has in the process brought more than a decade of measurable progress to the Venezuelan people. According to a report by the Center for Economic Policy Research, the Bolivarian Revolution nearly halved Venezuela's poverty rate, from 61% in 1997 to 32% by the end of 2011, and extreme poverty declined by 2/3, from 30% to 9% over the same period. The Venezuelan people have seen massive social investment for public services like education, healthcare, public housing, food subsidies, and pensions. At the same time, the state continues to expand the productive forces and diversify the economy in order to be less dependent on foreign imports and become a more self-sustaining economy. As part of the socialist direction of the Bolivarian Revolution, the government has also greatly emphasized promoting democratic popular control over socio-economic policies, as well as introducing communal and collective forms of social property. It is important to mention that Venezuela also leads a regional movement for the unification of Latin America. International bodies like CELAC, Communities of Latin American and Caribbean States, as well as Mercosur, South American Common Market, have shown the importance and need of a Latin American and Caribbean economic, social, and political integration. This wraps up this week's Adelante Tucson. I am Sarah Olivier.
And I'm Stephanie Cott. Join us next time on our segment on 5 on 20 News.